I cannot exclude that I won't be re-elected in the Czech presidential election. And in this case, I will keep my promise anyway, and I will name Mr. Babiš Prime Minister in February.
It's a tough time for the Czech government. The Prime Minister lost a vote of confidence after being accused of fraud just as the country heads to the polls in a second-round vote that could potentially shock the country. President Milos Zeman, known for xenophobic statements and his support of Putin, won the first round of the election. But it wasn't enough to prevent a runoff. Now Czechs are back at the polls. Will it usher in a new leader? More on this, let's talk to Theodor Marjanovic in Prague. He's an editorial writer at the Czech daily Hospodářské noviny. Thanks so much for joining us, Theodor. So let's look at Mr. Drahoš, who's competing with Mr. Zeman for the presidency. He says he's being smeared by Zeman as a pedophile, a communist collaborator, a pro-immigration elitist and globalist and so on. Is that true? Is it getting that dirty?
Of course it is. I get on my Facebook page, I get every day messages that are claiming these kinds of, smearing Mr. Drahoš, and probably it's done by Russian or pro-Russian circles in this country connected to Mr. Zeman. It is a very dirty campaign, and actually it's not surprising because this election is truly one of the most important we had in this country since 1989, since the fall of communism.
Yeah, so at the same time, as we mentioned, the Prime Minister, Mr. Babiš, was forced to resign over allegations of fraud and corruption. And then we have the president saying, whether I'm re-elected or not, I'm going to reappoint the Prime Minister because he can, because there's this window, even if he loses, where he can, right? How divisive is this going to be?
Well, you see, you have to understand that Mr. Zeman is clearly trying to buy Mr. Babiš's support or support of his voters in this presidential election. So he says, look, I am going to keep Mr. Babiš Prime Minister, whether he gets the votes in the parliament or not, in order to, to sway the people to vote for people who voted for Babiš to vote for him in this presidential election on Friday and Saturday this week. I don't think that this really could be the decisive, decisive move that could change the election. People want change. They don't want to have Zeman as the president in this country because Zeman is clearly trying to move this country towards Russia and China, towards their true, sphere of influence. And Russians don't have a good, they don't. People are afraid of Russians. They are afraid that they might be. They might actually do the same as they did in 1968, come here with tanks, and they want to very brutally control the country.
So all in all, depending on who wins, is this going to decide the future of the Czech Republic, whether it turns towards Moscow or whether it turns towards the West?
Well, see, the powers of the president in this country are somewhat limited. For the prime minister who has the final say. But the president, through his authority, through his moral authority, can have a really big influence. And this is a country that listens historically to presidents, what they have to say. Remember Václav Havel. So I think if Drahoš wins, and Drahoš is clearly a guy who wants to stay within the European Union, within the NATO treaty and so on, this country will keep the pro-Western, will keep its position as part of the Western civilization. If Zeman wins, then we are in trouble, and I'm very afraid what will happen with this country.
Okay, Theodor Marjanovic, good to pick your brain and get a deeper understanding of what's going on in the Czech Republic. Thank you very much for joining us.